Dear students, in this session we are going to discuss about models of behavior. What is behavior? In a previous session we had seen that behavior is what a person does. We do various things, and whatever we do can be termed as a behavior. And behaviors can be classified into two: overt behavior and covert behavior. Overt behavior can be defined as observable and measurable activity of a person. Overt behavior is the observable and measurable activity of a person. And these overt behaviors may be in the form of mental processes like decision making, or in the form of physical processes like handling a machine. And whether decision making is observable, it is observable in terms of the outcome of the decision. So decision making is an example for overt behavior. And there are so many observable physical processes. And the other type of behavior is called covert behavior. Covert behaviors are non-observable or measurable behavior. There are certain behaviors exhibited by individuals which are non-observable. Examples are feelings of an individual. A feeling of an individual is not observable to others, outsiders. Attitudes, perceptions, etc. All these are covert behavior. So, overt means observable behavior, and covert means non-observable behavior of an individual. And let's come to the process of behavior. In organizational behavior, we have a basic assumption that behavior is caused and it takes place in the form of a process. What does it mean by the statement behavior is caused? It means for every behavior there is a reason. Behind every behavior there is a cause. That is what we mean by the statement behavior is caused. And this behavior takes place in the form of a process. And we know when we say process, there is an input and finally there is an output, and in between there is a process of converting the input into output. That is simply a process. And in the case of behavior as a process, there are three models. And these three models are, the first one is SR model, and the second one is SOR model, and the third one is SOBC model. SR model, SOR model, and SOBC model. And let's see the SR model. This model, or all the models are trying to explain what is behavior. And in SR, S stands for stimulus and R stands for response. And behavior is a response to a stimulus according to this model. Behavior is a stimulus, a response to a stimulus. According to the stimulus, an individual response. For example, we might have come across various reflex action. When I hit you with a safety pin, the tip of a pin, immediately as a reflex action, you try to withdraw your hand in order to escape from the piercing of your skin. So there is a response to the stimulus that is applied. So behavior is a response to a stimulus according to this model, SR model. And the individual response according to the stimulus. That means the response is determined by the stimulus. And that is the simplest model of behavior. And the second model is SOR model. SOR. So previously we said that S is for stimulus and R is for response. And in between an O, organism comes. So it is stimulus, organism, response model. And according to this model, the stimulus is processed by the organism and followed by a behavior. In SR model, we saw that the response is according to the stimulus. But in SOR model, the organism determines or decides the response it wants to elicit, it wants to exhibit. It is not just the stimulus. It is not just according to the stimulus that the organism responds. Rather, the organism has a freedom to choose a response. So, for example, when there is a similar stimuli or stimulus, two individuals may be responding to that similar stimuli in different manner. That means the organism decides its response or its behavior. For example, when a teacher rebukes, scolds a student, one student may simply stand passively, and another student may react aggressively, and a third student may start crying, even though the scolding is same. That means the responses of these three students are decided by themselves. That individual, particular individual, organism decides its response. So that is stimulus organism response model. The response is determined by the organism. And the third one is an advanced version of model is SOBC model. SOBC. Stimulus is there, S is there, organism is there, but the response is modified as with two letters, BC. Let's see each one in detail. So there is a stimuli, there is an organism, and B stands for behavior, we can say. Previously we were using the term response. And there is another component here, C, that is consequences. And the stimuli may be both overt and covert. Sometimes the stimuli may be observable. Sometimes it may be non-observable. So there are both overt and covert stimuli, and the organism processes the stimuli, and on the basis of the processing of the stimuli, organism decides its response or behavior, and that response also may be overt and covert. The behavior may be sometimes observable, sometimes the behavior of or the response may be non-observable. But this model says the behavior or the response is based on the perceived consequences of the behavior. So the organism thinks about or perceives the consequences of his or her behavior. For example, as I said in the previous case, a teacher rebukes a student, scolds a student, and the student decides its response. For example, a student may assume that a student reacts aggressively to the teacher. He also raises his arguments. And according to this model, the response or the behavior of the student will be influenced by his perception of the consequences of his behavior. Suppose a student thinks that the teacher is very powerful. He has high capacity to punish him. Then he may have some control over his aggression or his reactions. That perception of the consequences may force him to be silent. And if the student perceives that the teacher is very powerless person, assume that it is a guest lecturer, for example, without much powers, then he or she may think that there is no problem in reacting aggressively to that teacher, so I shall react. That may be his perception. So the reaction or the response or the behavior is a product of the perception of the consequences of the behavior. I hope you understood the concept. So in the previous cases we were talking about that the response is a choice of the organism. But here in SOBC model we say surely it is a choice of the organism, but the response is very much influenced by the perceived consequences of the response. For example, when we assume that we are doing a crime, and when the local police officers are very strict, they are very impartial, they normally go for actions without any influences. So when we have a perception that surely there will be action for the crime, then surely a person will think about the consequences if he is caught in a crime, and that perception may inhibit him from involving in a crime. For example, when Rashiraj Singh was in charge of the transport department, he has made wearing of helmet very strict. And actually the consequences, surely there will be a fine if a person is caught without helmet or without wearing seat belt. The police and the vehicle department was very strictly following the direction of Mr. Rashiraj Singh. So as a driver, I know the consequences if I am caught without a helmet or without having my seat belt put in. So the perception of the consequences prevents me from not driving without a helmet. I will be wearing helmet whenever I ride a two-wheeler, or I will be putting my seat belt whenever I drive a car. So my behavior is influenced by the consequences of my behavior. If I am driving without having seat belt, I will be penalized. I may have to pay a fine. So that perception of the consequences influences my behavior. So that is SOBC model. So the behavior or response is not according to the stimulus or the organism, but on the basis of the perceived consequences of the behavior. So these three are the models of behavior: SR model, SOR model, and SOBC model. Now we enter into another area of discussion called individual behavior. And we know that organizations are composed of individuals, and each individual is different from the other. The efforts and contributions of human beings in organizations depend upon their behavior. So the individual behavior is very important for a manager. How the employees of his organization behave is very important to him, or very important to the organization, because the individual's efforts and contributions in the organization depend upon his or her behavior. And let's see what is individual behavior. Individual behavior is how an employee or individual behaves, reacts, or responds in a given environment. That is what individual behavior is. How an employee or individual behaves, reacts, or responds in a given situation or environment. That is called individual behavior. And the factors which affect the human behavior are individual variables and situational variables. There are different variables that influence us, that affects the human behavior or individual variable. Very predominantly we can say the major categories of those variables are individual variables and situational variables. So the individual difference, sometimes we say individual difference, that is almost similar to that of individual behavior. So the individual behavior says that there are differences in behavior in an individual over time. That is called intra-individual behavior. That means an individual may behave differently over a different period of time. Within that individual itself, there may be differences in behavior in an individual over time. And the other one is differences in behavior among individuals given the same set of stimuli. For example, suppose the stimuli or the environment is the same, but two individuals may behave differently. That is called inter-individual. Two individuals, suppose the individuals are X and Y. They are working in the same environment. They are faced with the same stimuli, but their reaction or their behavior or their response may be different, though the stimuli is the same. That is called inter-individual difference. So there are intra-individual difference and inter-individual difference. Intra-individual difference is the same person may behave differently in two different situations. And inter-individual difference is different individuals behave differently in a similar situation. So that is inter-individual difference. Let's see the factors causing individual behavior or individual difference. Both are almost the same. Some textbooks are writing or give different factors, but prominent authors say almost both are the same. So factors causing individual behavior or individual difference. So there are both individual variables and situational variables, as we said earlier. So the individual variables are physiological variables and socio-psychological variables. Under individual variable, there is physiological variable and socio-psychological variable. And under situational variables, there is organizational variables and job variables. And our discussion is limited to the differences in individual or factors causing individual behavior in the context of organizational behavior. So I'm talking in the context of OB, organizational behavior, about the individual difference or factors that influence individual behavior. So let's see the physiological variable. So the various physiological variables are age, gender, physical features, ability, etc. Surely we know that the age of an individual influences his behavior, or according to the age of the individual, there may be differences in the behavior of individuals. For example, a young employee may be more energetic than an aged employee. So age influences the individual's behavior or the differences in the behavior. Old people are supposed to be conservative than young people, and young people may be more energetic, innovative. And the second physiological variable is gender. We know there are differences between male and female in their behaviors, maybe in expressing emotions, maybe in dealing with situations. So the male and female differ. So gender influences the difference or individual behavior. Then physical features, the physical characteristics of the person. A fat person may be different in behaviors than a person who is slim. It may influence their physical reactions. And the fourth physiological variable is ability. Ability refers to the capacity of an individual to perform various tasks in a job. Ability refers to the capacity of an individual to perform various tasks related to his or her job. And there is intellectual ability and physical ability. And according to the changes in the ability, maybe intellectual or physical, the behavior of the person also differs. So these four variables are physiological individual variables: age, gender, physical features, ability. And the next is socio-psychological factors of individual variables. So the personality, learning, motivation, attitudes and values are the socio-psychological variable. Sometimes we call these variables as learned characteristics. Learned characteristics. So the personality, surely we'll be talking about personality in detail in the next session. The personality is the ability of a person to influence others. Sum total of ways in which an individual reacts and interacts with others. So that is personality. So your ability to influence another person influences your behavior. Learning. Learning is a permanent change in behavior of an individual. We'll be talking about dealing with the learning theories also in detail in coming topics. So learning, permanent change in behavior. And the other one is motivation. The motivation level of individuals vary, and according to the motivation, their behavior also. For example, a motivated student may be more committed to his studies or her studies, and a student who lacks motivation may be less interested in his studies. So the motivation influences his or her behavior. And the other one is attitudes. And if we have a positive attitude towards something, we may stand for that. We may work for that. And if we have a negative attitude, we may go away from that. That means our attitudes influences our behavior. And the other one is values. Our value system influences our behavior. And we acquire values from different sources. Whatever be the source of your value, the present value system. For example, if you are against bribery, your behavior may be different from a person who believes that there is no problem in getting or trying for bribes. So your values influences your behavior. And the second category is situational variable. And under that, organizational variables are there, job variables are there. Let's see the organizational variables first. Organizational variables are structure, process and climate. All these three are related to the organization in which the individual works. The structure of the organization. That means who reports to whom. What is the authority structure? So the structure, who is above me, how he behaves, who are under me, how I relate to them. So all those things influences my behavior. If we have a very closely monitoring mechanism structure in the organization, surely we may be forced to work more. So the structure influences my behavior. Then the second organizational variable is processes. Process. How the decisions are made in the organization. Whether you are given an involvement in decision making. Whether your voice is heard while taking decisions in the organization. If you are heard or if your opinion is considered, surely you will be more committed to that, the implementation of that decision. So the process, various processes, how promotion is given in a in an organization? Is it purely on the basis of merit, or is it a result of pleasing your boss? So the process in an organization that influences your behavior. Then the next is climate. It is organizational climate. So whether there is a positive climate which promotes hard work, organizational citizenship behavior. So the organizational overall climate prevailing in the organization also influences the behavior of individuals in an organization. So structure, process, climate, these three are the organizational variables, which is part of situational variables. Then the last variable is job variables, the second variable under situational variables. So these variables are related to your job. There are two such variables: nature of job and work environment. Nature of job means what is the nature of the job that the person, the individual performs in the organization. And according to that job, his or her behavior may be different. If you are always working in a very risky job, naturally your behavior will be tuned to face such risks in life. If you are working in a very comfortable situation, when you are out of such comfort zones, you may be very much distressed. That means your behavior is influenced by the nature of that job that you undertake in the organization. And the next one is working environment, work environment. Surely we know that the environment influences our behavior. So these are the two job variables: nature of job and work environment. So let's have a glance on the factors causing individual behavior or differences. As I said earlier, there are predominantly two categories of variables: individual variables and situational variables. Individual variables are further divided into physiological variables and socio-psychological variables. And the major physiological variables are age, gender, physical features, and ability. And the major socio-psychological variables are personality, learning, motivation, attitudes, and values. And the second category, called situational variables, are also further divided into two: organizational variables and job variables. The major organizational variables are structure, process, and climate. And the job variables are nature of job and work environment. And the nature of individual difference, how individuals are different in an organization. With respect to work, people differ in the importance to intrinsic rewards to the job, the type of compensation plan they desire, the style of supervision, the preferred schedule of work hour, the tolerance for stress and ambiguity. So let's see each one in detail now. The intrinsic rewards means the internal motivators, maybe sometimes achievement, satisfaction. If you are giving very much importance to your achievement in academic field, surely that will influence your behavior, and you will be different from another person, another student. He is not giving that much importance to academic achievements. So the importance being given to intrinsic rewards influences the behavior. or that causes an individual difference among the students. Then the second one is in the area of type of compensation plan they desire. Always, sometimes you may prefer a high compensation, but you are not bothered, you may not be bothered about the risk involved in the job or the security of the job. Rather, you want a high salary. Whether the job is permanent or temporary, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to you. There are some other individuals who may prefer a highly secured job even though it has less compensation. Such people may be always looking for a government job rather than a private job. Surely a job in a private sector may provide you more salary, but the security of that job is less. So in the type of compensation plan decided by the individuals, there is difference. And the third area is style of supervision. There are people who expect very close monitoring by the superior boss. But there are some other individuals who expect freedom in their job. So they differ in the style of supervision. And their preferred schedules of work hour. And suppose you are working in a situation where you can choose your working hours, whether you would like to have a daytime work. There are people who may prefer night shifts. I know some of our former students are working in Bangalore during night shifts. They have their own reasons for that, but they prefer that. So in terms of the preferred schedules of work, our individuals differ. And the other one is tolerance for stress and ambiguity. Stress means tension, uncertainty. Ambiguity means confusion. There are certain individuals who find it difficult to face any confusion. So they want everything in black and white, in clarity. They are unable to face any uncertainty in their life. When a stress comes, they will break down. But there are some other individuals who are very tolerant. They are very comfortable with high stress and confusing situations. So people differ in the level of tolerance for stress and ambiguity. So individuals differ in all these areas. That's all about individual behavior and individual difference. Thank you.